Who's bringing dessert?
Yeah, we could use some tonight. Okay, it looks like everybody's here. Monica, if you want to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
The North Clackamas Budget Committee meeting will now come to order. I will read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we sit and which we call the North Clackamas School District rests on the traditional and indigenous lands and village sites of the native peoples of the Kalapuya, Chinook, Molalla, and Clackamas. We take this opportunity to offer gratitude for the ability to learn, work, and be a community on this land. And we offer thanks to the original caretakers of this region. We recognize the historic policies of colonization, genocide, relocation, and assimilation that affected the indigenous and native families, both past and present, and that will affect those in the future, and honor the resilience and revitalization of our indigenous and native communities. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have been the stewards of this land throughout the generations. So next up is introductions. I'm not sure the best way to go about this. So I'm Monica DiPietrantonio, and I will be the chair of this meeting until someone replaces me momentarily. Angel, would you like to go next?
Yes. I'm Angel Landron, and I'm the Assistant Presiding Officer. So I will pass it to Emily.
I'm Emily Mackey. I'm a Budget Committee member. I will pass it to Jen Masocha.
I am Gemma Soja. I am also a budget committee member. Mitzi.
Hi, I'm Mitzi Bauer, a school board member. I will pass to Havala, Miss Ava on your name.
Yes, I still can't figure out how to fix that. My name is Havala, and I am a budget committee member and a parent of 3 kids. And I'll pass it to Corey.
Hi, I'm Corey Schmidt. I'm a budget committee member. And I will go, let's see, how about Orlando?
Hi, I'm Orlando Perez, a school board member and a parent of 2 in our school district. And I will pass it to Libra because she's not looking.
Hi everyone, I'm Libra Ford, also a board member, parent of 3, 1 graduate and 2 current in the school system. I will pass it to Stephen.
I'm Stephen Schradel. I'm a board member from North Clackamas. I'm a parent of 4 children, and one of them is staring at me right now when I make dinner. So. And I will pass it to Kathy Way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Way, and I am a school board member. And let's pass it over to Director McVeigh.
Thanks, Kathy. Tori McVeigh, school board member, parent of 3, and all 3 graduated. So that's great. And I will pass it to Dr. James.
Hello, Shay James, assistant superintendent, parent of 3. I've got 2 out working in the garden, shoveling gravel as we speak. So I like that. And I will pass it to Tiffany.
Good evening, Tiffany Shireman, Chief of Staff here in North Clackamas Schools, proud mom of 2. 1, my baby turns 20 today.
Hopefully you didn't forget dessert.
Gotten the theme here. Just caught the theme. Let's go, Lisa Schwartz.
I wasn't expecting that. Lisa Schwartz, work in the district office as in the superintendent's office as an assistant, and I'm here to help facilitate tonight. Oh, I guess I need to pass it on to someone. I'll pass it on to Superintendent Utterback.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Utterback, Superintendent, the school district. I too have a child who graduated from the school district, who is a young woman, fully employed as a registered nurse. So good job, North Clackamas. With that, I will pass it on to Venu.
Venu, I think that's you.
Sorry, I didn't catch the name. I apologize. I'm Venu Rao. I'm a budget committee member and a parent of two who are currently at Clackamas High School. And I will pass it to Orlando.
And I'm going to pass it to who has Gina.
Hello, I'm Gina Benaloka. I'm on the board, and I have two Milwaukee High School graduates.
Did we miss Mitzi?
I think Galen.
Nope, I think it's myself and Vivian. So my name is Galen Jacobson, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at North Clackamas. And I will pass it to Vivian.
I just texted Vivian and said she does not need to be here.
Oh.
So maybe she jumped off.
Okay, that's fine. So back to you, Monica.
Okay, so sorry, there might be some background noise. Our first item of business is to review the notes from April 13th, 2021 Budget Committee informational meeting. Is there any discussion? No discussion. So we will move on to the election of officers. So now we need to determine who will chair the budget committee for this year. Would anyone like to make a nomination? Well, I would.
Okay.
Oh, Orlando, you can make a nomination.
Well, I was going to nominate Angel for chair.
Would anyone like to second that nomination?
Bauer, I'll second.
So now we need to, oh, sorry, are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing as there's no other nominations, we will vote. Do I have to do a roll call vote on this? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So Angel, sorry, you're first on my screen. Angel, do you vote to approve your nomination? Elect you chair?
Yes, I do.
All right, Tori,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mitzi,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Venu,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Havilah,
Yes.
Orlando,
Yes.
Libra,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Stephen.
Yes.
Did I get everyone, or do I call Matt and Shay and Tiffany?
No, you
Oh.
don't call it. It's only but you haven't voted.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I also, yes. All right. So congratulations, Angel. You are the chair.
Thank you.
Does he get to take over from here, or do I do the vice
Yes,
chair
he,
thing?
he takes over from here. Angel, you should have a copy of the script for you to
go ahead and ask for a nomination for the vice chair.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for the vice chair, president vice chair?
I nominate Habla.
So we need to know who's, because I didn't see it.
This is Venu.
Oh, Venu. Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll second.
That was Monica.
Okay, and do we need to vote for it, right?
I would check, are there any other nominations?
Is there any other nomination? No additional nominations for the record. So let's vote. Monica.
Yes.
Let me go through the names. Emily.
Yes.
Corey.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Orlando.
Yes.
Gina.
Yes.
Libra.
Yes.
Tori.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Mitzi.
Yes.
Steven.
Yes.
Bainu.
Yes.
And yourself and Havala.
Havala.
Yes.
So what's next now?
Did you vote aye? I didn't hear you.
Yes.
No. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
perfect. So now we move on to the district equity policy.
Okay, so let's turn it to Superintendent Oderbach.
Good evening, everyone, again. I think I have the next 3 agenda items. The first item on the agenda is a review of the district equity policy. And in your printed materials, in your notebook, if you'll turn to page 9, you will find a copy of the district's equity policy. This is a policy of, one of probably several hundred policies that the district has regarding its governance and operational procedures. But there certainly are some policies that I think probably guide our work more holistically than others, and our equity policy is one of those. This policy has been in place since 2015. And our board will be revisiting this policy in June to see if it needs to be updated. And what the policy has some opening statements at the beginning, which I know many of our returning members have read before, but the district is really guided by the 4 foundational beliefs that you see in the middle of the first page there. Ensuring that each student can learn with adequate support at the highest levels. Maximizing the academic achievement of every child requires allocating resources equitably and not necessarily equally. And you'll hear that come through in our budget presentation and the budget documents that'll be presented to you later this evening. The third foundational belief is everyone in the district will act to eliminate disparities to prepare all students to be college and career ready. And fourth, An inclusive and welcoming environment plays a critical role in supporting a child's educational goals. And in order to achieve those 4 foundational beliefs, there are a number of what I refer to kind of as action statements. And I'll draw your attention to the first 2 of those tonight. The first one is that the district will systematically use district-wide and individual school-level data. It'll be disaggregated by race, ethnicity, language, special education, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, and mobility to inform district decision-making. And the second action statement is that we will provide students with equitable access to high-quality curriculum, programs, teachers, and administrators, extracurricular activities, and support services, even when this means differentiating resource allocation. And again, you should hear some examples of that this evening, and feel free to ask questions as we present the budget to you tonight with regards to those 2 action statements. I'll pause there and see if any of you have any questions regarding the district equity policy. Okay, seeing none, I will move on to the district strategic goals and objectives. You saw this earlier in the year when we went through some of our informational and background information to prepare you for these formal budget committee meetings. The North Clackamas School District is in the 3rd year of our 4-year strategic plan. So next year, we will go through a renewal process through the course of the next school year to have a new strategic plan in place for the fall of 2022. And when you look at our strategic plan, we're really guided by 5, what I kind of say are values. You see those on the front page, and I'm referring to page 7 in your board book tonight. Of equity, engagement, care, integrity, and excellence. And then we've crafted a strategic direction of the type of experience we would like each of our students to have in the school district. Really kind of hopefully tries to paint a picture of the school district and the systems and the processes and the procedures and the experiences we'd like each student to have during their time in the school district. On the back side of that document is our purpose statement and our goals, our vision and our objectives. And then we've identified 6 key performance indicators that we work on tracking to ensure that we're making progress. And we believe that those key performance indicators, if we're making progress on those and improving those outcomes, we will be meeting our goals and our vision. So when you look at our goals, there are 4. The first is addressing student success. We want to be advancing learning for each student. We want to do that at the same time that we're looking at our students' experiences and their well-being during their time in our schools. The second goal is focused on equity and the idea of creating a sense of belonging and inclusion with the expectation of success for each student. Goal area 4 is around quality. We want to ensure consistent, high quality in each of our programs and services. And number 4, deals with stewardship. We're entrusted to a significant amount of resources, community resources, and we want to make sure that we develop and manage those resources and assets that are entrusted to the school district to the very best of our abilities, and ensuring that we are meeting all of our commitments. So that's a brief overview of our goals. With each of those goals, then, there are a series of action plans that operationalize the strategic plan, and those action plans are crafted each spring and summer for the following school year by district staff to ensure, again, we're moving forward on our goals and leveraging those key performance indicators to ensure that we're doing what we said we set out to do. So again, I'll pause and see if you have any questions regarding the strategic plan.
Matt, this is Gemma Soja. I just have a quick question. And
Sure.
maybe it's something you can send me. We don't need to discuss it here, but I'm just wondering what the accountability measures were for staff for abiding by the equity policy. So when we see diversions from that plan, or we're not seeing that schools or individuals are living up to it, like where is the accountability and what's the plan for improvement, support, cultural competency? Again, if it can be sent, that's fine. We don't need to go into it here. I just want to use this opportunity to ask that question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we certainly can have a conversation offline. I think, right, everyone in our school district, and I think everyone in our community is on a journey when it comes to equity. I don't think there's an arrival point where you have reached your equity stance and we say you're good. And so, I think as I do focusing on the school level, I think if a parent's comfortable having a conversation with the teacher, I think that's where we want to start. And, if that comfort isn't there, or it, just doesn't, maybe the connection isn't there with a particular staff member, to work then with the building principal. And then again, at that point, if it doesn't seem to be getting better, or we're not seeing movement, then bringing that to one of our levels director, our executive director of elementary programs, middle school programs, or high school programs. Appreciate the question. Check in. Okay, with that then, you all get to sit back and listen to the superintendent talk some more as I will read into the record my budget message for this year. You also have this in the materials in your budget book, starting on page 1. We'll start out with a kind of a summary of where we are this year, summary of this year's budget. Talk a little bit about where I think we're headed, and then kind of wrap up with a summary of the budget that I'm presenting to you tonight. So as we bring the 2020-21 school year to a close, I am pleased to report that we are projected to end the year with a general fund ending fund balance of 14.2% of total resources. This is an increase of nearly 7% over the 2020-2021 budget. The 2020-2021 budget made significant investments in our school system, while also navigating challenging teacher and learning conditions that were brought on by this worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. Those investments, as you will recall, were an increase of 1.5 FTE in certified staffing, 3.6 FTE increase in classified staffing, primarily in custodial services. We provided a salary and step increases for each employee group while ensuring compliance with the minimum wage increases. We invested $350,000 in student technology device replacement, another $160,000 in elementary playground replacement, the implementation of a new high school biology course, the continual building of cultural competence through professional development that is focused on the needs and outcomes for each student. We expanded our new educator mentoring program to reach both first and second year educators. And we fulfilled the planning and preparation for the opening of Adrian C. Nelson High School this coming fall. The district also saw an additional $4.3 million invested through the student investment account during this past school year. Those investments included counselors and social workers, health and wellness specialists, special education teachers, community outreach facilitators, additional contracted mental health services, professional development, and elementary teacher support at Title I schools. In addition, there were nearly 7 million in COVID-19 relief funds made available through the elementary and secondary emergency relief funds. And we use those resources on student computers and hotspots, ventilation improvements, safety supplies, staffing for the virtual online program, and additional staffing needed to support the various learning models, delivery models. In addition, during the past year, community continued to see millions invested in district facilities through our 2016 capital construction bond. We're now 55 months into the 65-month bond timeframe. And I'm happy to report that 100% of commitments have been fulfilled on all completed projects. Thus far, 30 of the 41 projects have been completed. 2 projects are currently in construction, with 9 projects that are starting construction this spring. By the fall of 2021, nearly all bond projects will be completed. Significant bond projects completed during this school year include Milwaukee El Puente Elementary School, Oregon Trail Elementary School, Sabin-Schellenberg Professional Technical Center, Riverside Elementary School, Technology and Information Services, and View Acres Elementary School. Bond projects currently under construction or slated to begin construction this summer include Adrian C. Nelson High School, Ardenwald Elementary School, Hector Campbell Center, Clackamas High School, Happy Valley Elementary, Happy Valley Middle, New Urban High School, Rock Creek Middle School, Scouters Mountain Elementary, Spring Mountain Elementary, and the Transportation Center Phase 3B. So as we set out to build and adopt a 2021-2022 district budget, we did so with the following guiding principles. First, we want to comply with all federal, state, and local legal requirements. Second, we want to comply with board policies and administrative regulations, including a minimum 5% ending fund balance. Third, we want to align our budget with our district strategic direction and goals, and that includes those goals that I reviewed earlier of student success, equity, quality, and stewardship. Fourth, we want to make decisions for the long term. We want to consider the impacts on students and staff. And we want to consider long-range revenues, expenditures, consequences, sustainability, and return on investment. We want to invest in and utilize data in our decision-making. And finally, we want to promote transparent communication and of information and decision-making during the budget development process. So Oregon's 2019-2021 K-12 budget of $9 billion was a significant increase in school funding. This level of funding, along with the passage of the Student Success Act, saw Oregon's educational funding climb significantly closer to the quality education model recommendations. Unfortunately, the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic saw funding for the student investment account drop nearly 70%, from $13.8 million to $4.3 million for our school district. Fortunately, the state was able to maintain its commitment to the state school fund of $9 billion during the past year. Looking ahead to the next biennium, the governor and the co-chairs of the Legislative Ways and Means Committees are currently proposing a $9.1 billion state school funding level. This 1% increase in the state school fund is significantly inadequate to maintain our current service levels, as utilities, health insurance, liability insurance, and cost of living adjustments are all estimated to increase more than 1%. State education associations are advocating for a state school fund of $9.6 billion to maintain current service levels, and the North Clackamas School Board has adopted a legislative agenda seeking at least $9.5 billion. So preparing for the 2021-22 district budget is a difficult task, given the uncertainty regarding the funding level for the state's school fund. Tonight, I am presenting a budget for adoption that is based on $9.3 billion in state K-12 funding and an additional $19.8 million in local option levy revenue. The budget is also based on the assumption that district enrollment will increase by approximately 171 weighted students compared to 2020-2021. As general fund budget, a general fund budget based on $9.3 billion in state revenues will assume the following. It assumes an additional $516,000 in technology funding to support classroom management software, web filtering, security software, inventory management, and an additional 0.5 FTE as the district shifts to a district-sponsored one-on-one device for all students in grades 6 through 12. It includes an additional $210,000 in facilities to provide additional grounds crew of 2.0 and maintenance staff 1.0, with the expansion of district square footage, as well as the addition of $300,000 in maintenance funding. The budget will include an additional $105,000 in custodial staffing that will provide full-time evening custodians at most elementary schools. It will include $2.3 million in additional staffing, extended responsibility stipends, and one-time opening expenses for the opening of Adrian C. Nelson High School. It includes an additional $155,000 in property and casualty insurance coverage and 4% increases in purchase services such as water, electricity, and fuel. It includes an additional $100,000 in a school resource officer staffing, as the city of Milwaukee will no longer financially support the school resource officer at Milwaukee High School. It includes $130,000 as we shift funding for the district's communication director from the capital construction bond to the general fund. It includes cost of living adjustments for all staff, and step movement on the salary schedule for staff who qualify for that step movement. It includes a reduction of $400,000 in the areas of contracted services, textbooks, supplies, and materials. With those assumptions, fund balances and revenues and expenditures will be the following. The 2020-2021 general fund ending fund balance is projected at $34.3 million. That is 14.2% of our total general fund revenues. The 2021-22 general fund revenue projections are based on a K-12 state school fund of $9.3 billion, which is expected to generate approximately $190 million for the North Clackamas School District. The 2021-2022 projected local option levy revenue is $19.8 million. So the total 2021-22 general fund revenue is projected at $254.2 million. Again, approximately $190 million from local and state revenue, $19.8 million from local option revenue, and $34.3 million from the beginning fund balance, and $10 million in fees, grants, and interest. The total 2021-2022 general fund expenditures are projected at $230.5 million. And this will leave a general fund ending fund balance at $23.7 million, which is 9.32% of the total general fund resources. It is important to point out that this proposed budget will spend down the district's fund balance by a projected $10 million. This is not sustainable over time, and therefore it is critical that the state legislature fund Oregon's public schools at a level that maintains current service levels. In addition to the general fund budget, we are preparing budgets for the student investment account at $10.97 million and the high school success, also known as Measure 98, at 4.2 million. The district will also have available about 17.6 million in ESSER 3 funds, the elementary secondary emergency relief funds. These funds have targeted uses. For example, 20% must be allocated to addressing learning loss. At this time, the district will use these emergency funds to support summer learning and activity programs, virtual online program staffing for next year, and internet network improvements. After these expenditures, the district will have approximately 12 million available for allocation, and these funds can be utilized through 2024. So as we look to the future, we must continue to examine and implement financial systems and practices that will build long-term financial resiliency over the next 5 years, while ensuring we meet our district's mission of preparing graduates who are inspired and empowered to strengthen the quality of life in our local and global communities. In order to meet that mission, we need to first initiate a strategic plan renewal with rigorous community engagement that will lead to the implementation of a new strategic plan in 2022-2023. We need to look to the renewal of the local option levy in 2023. We need to begin to plan for a third and final phase of the capital construction bond program with a levy on the ballot in 2024. We need to plan and prepare for potential PERS rate increases in future years. We need to remain nimble in instructional delivery and in our school models due to the public health protocols established in response to this worldwide pandemic. We need to continue to plan for curriculum adoptions that meet the requirements of current state standards and ensure cultural relevance in those instructional materials. We need to ensure that our teachers have professional development addressing ongoing curriculum adoptions, quality instructional practices, equity, and students living with trauma. We need to ensure our students have the necessary mental health supports by working with community and government partners. We need to ensure that we strategically invest in high school success, that those Measure 98 funds, targeting college and career development, dropout prevention, and career technical program expansion and development in order to increase graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment. We need to continue to use our equity focus to drive improvements. The district needs to continue to increase diversity of our staff, facilitate more student voice, and extend equity trainings to students, parents, and community members. And finally, we need to continue to advocate for school funding at Oregon's quality education model levels. So today we are preparing for the return to school on-site 5 full days per week in the fall with a virtual online option for students and families that are not yet comfortable returning to in-person learning. While we remain excited at the return of full in-person learning, the COVID-19 pandemic has had and continues to create significant uncertainty in our educational programs and systems. We lack clarity regarding state funding levels and projected student enrollments. For these reasons, it will be critical that the district maintain a healthy fund balance and cautiously allocate those ESSER 3 funds until there is more clarity in both state funding and district enrollments. My hope is that our nation and our state will see the effects of the pandemic begin to wane as more individuals, including students, are vaccinated. This would hopefully lead to a strong economic recovery, and we can once again begin to invest in the education of our state's students. Respectfully submitted, your Superintendent, Matt Gerbat. And with that, I will open the floor to questions.
I have one question. If the governor's proposing budget of 9.1 billion prevails, how much will be the gap in the revenue reduction?
I don't have that at my fingertips on how, but let me, when I'm done presenting, I will look that up and I will get that to you. What I can share with you today is that the Legislative Budget Office that helps provide information to the state legislature, both the senators and the representatives, came out today with a budget proposal at $9.3 billion for K-12 education. That is to be presented to one of the Ways and Means committees tomorrow. We'll see where that goes, but it is the first sign that the legislature is interested in moving off that $9.1 billion number to a more sustainable number of 9.3. So I do remain optimistic that we will hit that 9.3 number that we're building our budget on. And I remain hopeful maybe that we can even get a little bit above that 9.3.
Okay, thank you hear that. Worst case scenario, if we have a gap, are we going to cover the gap with the reserve?
Yeah, what I can tell you at 9.1, we still would end next year with an ending fund balance above 5%. And though it would be obviously significantly less than the 23 million that we would end at 9.3. And so, I think we have to be cautious about using those federal emergency relief dollars to balance the budget. Those are one-time dollars. And once we spend them, they're gone. And so you could theoretically use it to cover a year, but then understand that you would still be forced to make cuts because those dollars, like I said, once they're spent, they're gone. So you can't build your budget on those dollars.
Thank you.
I think it's Tori and then Kathy and then Mitzi.
First off, thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone that's on the screen tonight. And for the public, I just want to publicly commend you, Matt. Although our fund balance has increased because of lack of maybe spending during this COVID year, the fund balance that we are able to enjoy is because of the last 10 years of your stewardship on making sure that you have continued to, I don't want to say spend wisely, but in essence, spend wisely. And the public really needs to know that Dr. James is inheriting a healthy fund balance. Although we will be deficit spending, I'm confident that this community will come through and our legislatures, our lawmakers will come through and we'll continue to get our fair share, or the schools will get their fair share of the general fund. It's going to take effort for sure, but I just really want to thank you for the fund balance that we are enjoying. And I do have a question. Is there a chance that SR3 monies won't happen? I don't think we have them yet. I think they've been promised. Is there any outside shot that might not show up in our bank account?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I think both Galen and I are very confident that they're coming our way. And Galen, maybe you can chime in. Do you have a timeline or an estimate?
The estimates are out there, and we're getting ready to put in plans on how we're going to spend them. The big thing is we will get a portion of it up front, and then the rest we'll have to ask for more on a reimbursement. But we don't know exactly what that portion is that we'll get up front. We've heard up to 40%, but they want to be sure that we absolutely cover that 20% in learning loss.
Thank you so much. And Galen, thank you for putting this book together. It's like a thesis every year.
Director Wei.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Utterback. My question was around actually the use of ESSER funds, especially for making up the summer learning loss. And I know that this is a new funding source for us. We want to continue to focus on equity, closing disparities. probably looking at data is what I'm assuming. Will there be, and we want to make these investments wisely so that it reaches our students so that they can catch up. So is there a plan that will come before the budget committee in particular and before the school board in particular around June or July so that we have sort of a deeper sense of, okay, with this amount of money that we're receiving, this is exactly where it's going to with either grade, various grade levels or various student populations that need to be served?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a number of resources, really kind of two or three actually, funding sources that we're looking at for summer learning loss. And then obviously, as we move into the coming school year, I think we will need to again target additional learning loss, because I don't think for various reasons we may not reach all students this summer, and there may be and there will be a need to continue to work with students over the course of maybe the next couple of years to get them to grade level. So the first bucket is the state summer learning funds that we applied for on Monday and received. Our proposal was approved. At Thursday night's board meeting, board members will hear how we're going to use some of those additional state resources that were granted to us a couple of weeks ago. Those resources, in order to receive these additional state dollars, also come with matching funds. So we have to identify additional resources to be able to access these state funds. We likely will utilize, in some cases, some of our Measure 98 high school success resources. We could also use general fund resources that we had already had targeted for our summer program. And we can utilize these federal ESSER dollars as well for summer programming. So this is all happening relatively quickly. The state, allocated somewhat, I would say the amount was somewhat surprising, amount of money that the state a couple of weeks ago came out with to support learning loss. So we're still putting those budgets together and where we'll pull those matching funds. But yes, we can use some of those federal dollars to use as a match for the state dollars. And then it also helps achieving that 20% of the ESSER dollars that have to be spent on learning loss. So it's all kind of coordinated. But to give you a short answer, we will be presenting to you during my superintendent's report on Thursday what we're looking at for a summer program.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up question on that. So, and will there be continued parent surveys that happen throughout the summer? I know that sometimes, usually during the summer, folks tend to check out because it's summer vacation time, but will there be that ongoing engagement, especially for just such unprecedented, year and a half? Will there be that type of engagement for our parents and community to weigh in?
Yeah, I will let Dr. James chime in on the parent survey. What I can share with you, we literally received a notification of these state dollars probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we had to submit a plan on Monday. And so it did not afford the opportunity for a lot of community engagement. And so what I think where that's driving us is building upon a lot of the summer programs we previously had and expanding those, and then looking at a couple of places for additional summer engagement and intervention. And I think where the community engagement will come into play is pushing out the information so parents and students know how to access these additional programs. So Dr. James, did you want to add anything to that?
I can share, we do have a small team that has been meeting to put together a thought exchange But however, as Superintendent Utterback shared, we had to turn in the application, but we still know that we will find value in the feedback that we get and try to fill in some of the places if we that perhaps we missed and that maybe parents shared with us that they were interested in moving forward. So yes, we're working on that, but there is some overlap with that in terms of application.
I think what we're also looking at this summer is both, academic support and tying into learning loss. We're also just looking at engagement and getting kids onto our campuses, engaging in activities, social activities, right, that they necessarily haven't been engaged in for the last year. And I think, that's just as critical as well for our students. So looking at really kind of both arenas. Director Bauer.
Oh, thank you, Superintendent and Galen, for all of the hard work and the information here. It's very valuable and helpful. I think Director Way asked my question. Maybe I was just going, and we'll hear more Thursday, it sounds like, the summer programs and enhanced activities. Does it include any additional childcare?
Yes.
Okay. Just wondering, that's all I wanted to know.
Yep.
And parents will be hearing more, it sounds like. Then my other follow-up is, can you go over the timeline of the legislature? And when you think it's in Ways and Means, when will this final decision be made? I think it's helpful for the public because there's still time for people to get involved, write letters, get knowledgeable about this, and write their legislators about making and lobbying for the 9.6.
Yeah, certainly this year has been a little unusual just because of the pandemic. They haven't necessarily been meeting in person. So a lot of it's been online, which has been a challenge to engage our legislators. So what I can share is that I believe the governor is probably going to get involved in discussions at the states for the state's school fund in the next couple of days or tomorrow, perhaps. And I would anticipate where I think we'll start seeing the budget start moving will be after the May 19th revenue forecast. And I think, cross our fingers that the May 19th revenue forecast is continuing the kind of that positive trajectory around state revenue. And I would expect potentially shortly after that, we would see the state school fund come out of Ways and Means and move on to the full legislature for action shortly after that. They know, and historically, they being the state legislature, historically have funded education first and gotten that budget out. And so I would expect that to continue. So 2 to 3 weeks, best guess.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Ford.
Thank you, Superintendent Utterback, for that report. I have a question about ESSER $3 because ESSER 1 and 2 had specificity to it that was given to the districts, correct?
Yeah, I would actually say ESSER 1 and 2 were a little bit more broad in their allowable uses. I mean, we were in the midst. ESSER 1 was last summer, right in the midst of everything, and so it was fairly broad. ESSER 2 got maybe a little bit more specific. ESSER 3's got some, I would say, tighter criteria on the uses of the 3 funding packages.
Yeah, I just think it's important for everyone listening and for this committee to understand that, these dollars are big on paper because obviously they're large numbers for an individual, but educating children costs a lot of money. And even though these dollars seem like a lot, there's a lot to do. And when we have so much unfinished learning that has happened over this year, we have to fund that. And it still comes with some specificity. So it's not always going to make everyone happy because some of that specificity is not designated by us.
Correct. I mean, we know that a little over $3.5 million of those ESSER III dollars needs to address learning loss, for example. And we know that operating next year a virtual online program for students and families that are not yet comfortable returning, to the in-person instruction is going to be somewhere between 3 and 4 million. So it goes quickly too. Gina, did I see you raise your hand? Go. Director Benaloga.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, Superintendent. And thank you as well, Galen. I have a question about the estimate of that you're thinking that it's based on district enrollment that's going to increase by 171 weighted students. Can I get a sense of where that number is coming from? And what are the plans to, is that a good number? Are we lowballing that number? And is there a way to increase that number if so?
Yes, so we work with a demographic firm called Flow Analytics, and we've worked with them now for a couple of years. And they look at our enrollment trends. They look at birth rates in the school district. They look at building permits. They really look at all aspects that go into determining how many school-age children are going to be of school age, on September 1st, and then how the percentage of those that enroll in public school, the percentage of those that homeschool, the percentage that would go into private school. So we've got years of data, and so we're able to look at trends and usually come up with pretty strong estimates. We usually are within 1% of our estimates. That being said, we've never made estimates in the middle of a pandemic. And we know that we had about 900 students that this last year that chose other educational options. They chose to, about 250 of our kindergarten students that we expected to enroll did not enroll. We believe that they will come back now this year. We had probably about 300 of our kiddos that parents chose to homeschool. And then we had another probably 250 or so that chose other online charter programs. Maybe they didn't get into our program, and so they sought out another program. So our estimate of enrollment is based upon 85% of those students that we lost, or sorry, I wouldn't say we lost them. They chose other options, that they will come back. Then in addition to that, we have growth that's happening in the school district. And we had anticipated growth both last year, and we've got anticipated growth in this coming year, just simply due to our district building new houses and people moving into the district because of the quality of our schools. So there's a lot of factors that have gone into that. And the last factor I would say is that in looking at Flow Analytics number that they're projecting for us for next year, we reduced it by 100. So we have even pulled back just a little bit just to make sure that hopefully we are not overestimating our enrollment. That goes into, I will tell you, one of what you heard in my budget message a couple of times is I think we need to be very cautious in allocating these additional one-time resources, simply because I think there is some uncertainty around how many students will show up in the fall. And as we know, we are funded based upon our student enrollment.
All right, thank you.
Banu, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I noticed something in your budget message, which was surprising and exciting. Thank you very much for presenting it. And it seems like we're moving to a device system for one-on-one from 6th through 12th. That's got to be a huge impact. And I'm sure very welcome to a lot of people, because now they can also study at home, which they may not have had an option before. So if you can elaborate on that a little bit more than just my assumption so that everybody understands what that really means.
Yeah, I appreciate you drawing that out and allowing me to elaborate on it a little bit. I think one of the things that the pandemic showed us is that we can operate, a school system where students have access to technology. All students have access to technology, and we're excited that beginning in the fall, the school district will provide a Chromebook to every single student in grades 6 through 12. And we will then look in future years of expanding that to upper elementary grades. What that means for us is it does mean some additional technology support staff, because we will have a lot more devices operational, and so that's accounted for in some of our budgets. But anyone who has parents in our school system or anyone who has students in our school system knows that over the course really of the last 5 or 6 years, we've shifted a lot of our curriculum to be online curriculum, where students can access that both in their classroom, but then at home as well. And in some cases, that can produce some inequities for students if they don't have internet access at home or don't have a computer at home that has that internet access. So we're prepared this coming fall to provide a Chromebook to every student, and then continue to provide those hotspots for students and families that need that Wi-Fi access, or in some cases need additional Wi-Fi access in their home as well. They may have 2 or 3 or 4 students that are all online at the same time, and sometimes their internet provider isn't able to support that much usage.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone very much for making this happen.
So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Angel to call on Galen to bring us home tonight.
So what I have to say is I'm going to turn it to Galen. Okay.
Righty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am going to share my screen with you. And someone could let me know if you can see that. Right? So tonight I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the state school fund. We haven't really had a chance to go through this at our informational meetings in much detail, but I thought I would go ahead and give you a little primer in the state school fund. The state school fund estimates can be found online if you go out to the ODE website and look for state school fund. And we will always be page 12. We are school district number 12, and by happenstance, because we're also in Clackamas County, we're page 12. So it's easy to find. The state school fund is broken down into a couple of different pieces: local revenue, the transportation grant, and then the actual general purpose grant that is used to create the full total revenue. So I'm going to walk through this a little bit more on the next slide. As we look at local revenue, it's made up of our property taxes that we levy. We're using our permanent rate. This is not the property taxes that are levied to pay on our bonded debt, nor is this the property taxes that we receive for our local option levy. Both of those two pieces fall outside of the state school fund. Some years we get federal forest fees, and some years we do not. They're not a lot of money, but we do have to let the state know if we think we'll be getting them. Next, we have a common school fund. and a county school fund. County school fund has not been very large for us. I think the largest it's been in the past few years has been about $15,000. All of that together goes as an estimate to the state. We put together an estimate in December before the following school year starts. That is it's called the estimate of membership and revenue. So we tell the state what we think we're going to get in property taxes and how many students we think we will have. We also tell them how much we think we will spend on eligible transportation expenditures. So on the right, that box on the right that says 2020, 2021 transportation grant, we say, how much do we think we will spend in total transportation expenditures and that are eligible? So taking students to and from school is the biggest part. For this year, they also allowed us to use any transportation expense for delivering food and supplies and curriculum to students. In the past, that was not an eligible expense, but due to the pandemic, they allowed that to be. And then we get a reimbursement rate based off of where we rank on that. You see that transportation per ADMR rank, and we're at 52%, which allows us to have a transportation reimbursement rate of 70%. So we get 70% back on every dollar that we spend on transportation. The lower box on the local revenue, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't really have anything to do with local revenue. It's not a revenue source, so to speak, but it looks at the experience of our teachers. And the state school fund formula says if you have teachers that have greater experience than the state average, they will give you an experience adjustment because they assume that your teachers who have more experience cost more than a district that maybe has teachers that have not as much experience. So now we're at the bottom half of the state school fund calculation. You'll see here at the top, it says, what is your extended average daily membership weighted? That's what ADMW stands for. So you take your regular students, which is ADMR, and all of the different weightings for special education, poverty, English language development, pregnant and parenting, foster care, all of those are extra weightings that we get on each student. And the state school fund looks at your current year number of ADMW and what your prior year ADMW was, and it will take the greater of the two. So for us, that's a good thing this year. And for many, many districts in the state, it was a good thing this year because our 2019-2020 ADMW was $20,554.31. Our current for 2020-2021 is at $19,497.89. And that's what Matt just referenced is the students that chose either to go to an online charter school, homeschool, or just didn't register their student. Many of the kindergartners just weren't registered. So the state school fund is going to use the larger of those two amounts, and we'll use the $20,554 number to calculate what our reimbursement, our state school fund amount is. For the general purpose grant, it's a formula that says take your teacher experience adjustment of $1.47, that was in the slide just before us, or 1.47, it's not a dollar amount, 1.47 years, multiply that by $25, then add that to a base amount of $4,500, and this is the result. If we had a negative adjustment, if we had teachers that weren't as experienced, we could wind up with less than $4,500 as the base amount to calculate the rest of the formula on. Then you take that amount and you multiply it by the extended ADMW, and then by a funding ratio. The funding ratio is something the state calculates, and it can be found on the front page, the very first page of the state school fund formula. And it takes for us, this year was $9.0 billion as the total state school fund. It pulls out local revenue, or adds in local revenue, and then pulls out certain, they call them carve-outs, things that the state is going to pull out of the state school fund and specifically allocate to programs that it has. And the state goes through this whole calculation and then figures that by how many students overall the state is assuming it's going to have for weighted students. And then you get this funding formula of 1.9299578266173. They take it out a very long ways. That gives us our total general purpose grant of $179 million. We add to that the number that you saw on the previous page, our transportation grant, which was estimated to be $7,700,000. That's our total formula revenue. Now, from that, the state subtracts out the money that we've already received, which is our local revenue. So we would get from the state the $187 million less the $76 million in property taxes, for a total of $111,396,220 for this school year. And then you can see these rates they calculate: the general purpose grant, charter school rate, and our total formula revenue. And that's how the state school fund works. This is what we're supposed to get for this year. And this is the amount that we will have received by the end of this month in May. We will also receive an adjustment for last year in this month. They true up everything a full year later and go back and recalculate the entire state school fund based on actual actual property taxes that were received, that the total actual number of students and weightings that they had for the year, all of the pieces that it takes a solid year to really refine and make sure that the state has all the correct numbers. And then they give you an adjustment. It's either an increase or a decrease. We will see a hefty increase this year from last year's state school fund. So that's how the state school fund works into our calculation. And it is the majority, by far, the largest part of our revenue in the general fund. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget and the presentation in the document that you have. As Matt talked, we have the budget message, which is found in the introductory section, which also has the guiding principles, strategic plan, the equity policy. It has an explanation of how the budget is put together, our financial overview, all the information on the committee members, organization chart, and calendar. It's meant to be a liftable section that you would have, even if you didn't see the full financial budget behind that, you would have a very good idea of what was happening at the school district. Then we have the pages that are state required. And that's the financial section. The financial section is large and very detailed. It shows resources by fund, by source, so where those resources are from, and expenditures both by function, So appropriation level, how they're spent, and object, what they're really spent on. Is it spent on supplies or is it spent on salaries? Function means, is it spent on instruction or is it spent on support? For example, the funds that we show you are the general fund, which is our operating fund, our special revenue fund. When you think of those funds, it's filled with lots of grants and other sources that are restricted for very specific purposes. And they're restricted not by us internally as a school district, but by external sources. Next, you have debt service fund, which is the fund that holds all of our resources to pay back our general obligation debt. Then we have the capital projects fund, which is for the acquisition and construction of major facilities, and all of our bond work, as well as our capital projects, what we call our capital projects fund, regular capital projects fund, which is funded largely by construction excise tax. And then we have our enterprise fund. So this is where our CARE program is, operations that are similar to a private institution. Then we have internal service funds, which includes our insurance, our health insurance fund, and our workers' comp fund, property liability. And then we have our trust and agency funds, assets held in trust for others. We have typically also had our scholarships there, but we have been moving scholarships out into the foundation. So what this includes mostly at this point is our charter schools, because these charter school amounts that we hold there, we, for most of our charter schools, we supply the teachers. They use all of our teachers and staff. So that is where we account for those assets that we're holding in trust for them. So this is something that I shared with you last year, and it is variance information on expenditures. But before I get to actually talking about expenditures, I know that when we met on April 13th, we didn't have an expectation at that point yet of exactly what we would be getting from the state for the May payment for the true up from last year, which is causes a change in our beginning fund balance from what we had looked at before of about $5 million in revenue. And so that's a large change. The other, I would say, large change that we had was that we moved expenditures from the IDEA grant, which was going to be overspent, and moved those expenditures back into the general fund in salaries and benefits. So as we look at expenditures, and this is by object level, so what types of things did we spend it on? Our salaries are up by $7.6 million, and that's mostly for a 2%. We're assuming, we're still in bargaining, but we are assuming a 2% COLA and a full step for all employees that are eligible for a step. Additional special education FTE that was moved from IDEA. Additional FTE that Matt discussed in his budget message for additional FTE and extended responsibility for Adrian Nelson High School, additional custodial and maintenance FTE, and some FTE to help technology with the implementation of one-to-one devices. Associated payroll costs, you would expect to see go up commensurate with what we experienced in salaries. They did not go up by that much, by that same percentage, mostly because we had a significant offset for PERS that we had budgeted for in the prior year, PERS set aside, that we do not need to have this year. And we also will see a reduction in our PERS rate for the next 2 years of the biennium. And that offsets a large majority of the increase that we see for health insurance, FICA, and other associated payroll costs. Purchase services, the biggest increase there is charter school payments. They go up commensurate with the increase in state school fund, and also because some of our, especially one of our charter schools, has seen a large increase in students that we allowed them to go to have an increase in students up to the contractual limit of their contract. And this is also where we have all of our purchase services for utilities, which had significant increases, both currently in this year that we have budgeted for in this year, and then also in next year. In the 400s for supplies and materials, we have seen an increase of 2% on most supplies and materials, and we have increased supplies for Adrian Nelson High School opening. There was no change in capital outlay. Other objects, the majority of this is the $155,000 that Matt referred to in his budget message for property liability insurance, and there were some other increases in that object as well. We saw a slight increase in our transfers to other funds. This was due to the transportation facility debt having a slight adjustment in the debt service schedule. And as Matt said, we have increased our ending fund balance, or our contingency fund, because we had such a large beginning fund balance, and we have spent it down considerably, but we are still holding on to a portion of that to see us through the next year. So that's expenditures as we look at them by object. And I know this is kind of tiny, but this is expenditures by function. I've only highlighted a few. Most of them, the biggest change is the increase in salaries and payroll costs. But for some of them, I wanted to highlight the fact that, like at high school, you'll see it's up over the others, the other levels. And that is due specifically to the opening of Adrian Nelson High School and the $2.3 million that we had to add there for both salary and extended responsibility. The biggest change here in restrictive programs, which is 1220. This is our special education, one of our special education functions, and that is due to the increase of the movement of FTE that was previously funded by IDEA and needed to move back into the general fund, and will have to stay there next year as well. Charter school payments are up. We had a reduced FTE need here. And even though it's a large percentage, when you're looking at a small dollar amount, moving even one FTE causes a huge change in their variance. Attendance and social work. This is one of the positions at Adrian Nelson that isn't up in an instructional function, but is shown down here. We also have a couple of positions further down in operations and maintenance, which includes custodial, so the addition of custodians at Adrian Nelson. For the 2140 function for psych services, this includes online assessment and scoring increases that we gave due mostly to the pandemic. So this may be one time, but it needed to go in this year. We had increase for strategic plan consulting and handbook review in the executive administration services. We are holding a position for the VOP administration administrator expense, and it may move to ESSER, but it has not yet. We have the PERS adjustment. The fiscal services held all of the PERS set aside, That was we held it in a support function. We don't need that. So that's the big adjustment here. The big adjustment in the function 2540 is increasing of additional grounds and maintenance workers, additional custodial staff, and the property liability insurance is split between both the operations and maintenance function and the student transportation services, because that is where we have either property or liability insurance. The liability is on the transportation and some property, but the rest of it is under grounds or under operations and maintenance, because that is where our property is held. In internal services, we've had an increase for replacement of courier vehicles and purchasing staff that moved from the bond into general fund. Matt also talked about the movement of a position from bond to general fund in the public information services staff. And then finally, in technology services, there was a little over $500,000 put in for classroom management, filtering, and security contracts, as well as increased ongoing costs. So that's the variance by function. And all of those are just in the general fund. And then I have some highlights of other funds. Our special revenue fund is up by a little over $30 million, went from a $50 million figure to an $80,000 figure. That includes the summer school grant funds from the state that Matt talked about, which are up to $5 million. The CARES ESSER 2 and 3, we will still have some remaining budget that it's spoken for, but we won't have received everything by the end of the year. So we will roll those funds over into next year for ESSER 2. And then ESSER 3, which we have budgeted for the 17.1 million. We were estimating originally 17.6, but I believe it was just a week ago we got the actual allocation of 17.1 million. Our nutrition services fund will be up by at least $5.2 million this year, or this coming year, due to the fact that we will be using the summer or the seamless summer option to feed all students next year. We will receive reimbursement from the feds through the free and reduced lunch program, but we need to make sure that we have enough capacity there so that if every student decided to eat, we know every student will not. There will be the children that have to have their very particular, sandwich that they love from their mom. But we need to make sure that we have enough capacity there so that if we do see an increase, we would have enough money to or budget capacity to cover it. Our debt service fund has increased to cover our debt service payments. That's all been in the debt service schedule, so you can see how that's working there. Capital projects has reduced significantly from over 200 million to about 80 million due to the spend down of our budget or of our bond, and it's coming to an end. We'll be finishing up the bulk of it this next fiscal year. Community services overall budget didn't change, but the types of resources did. So we will not be looking at as large of a beginning fund balance for them, but we will be looking at some more revenue for increased planned programs that they are going to have. And that will also increase their expenditure amount in that, but we won't have as large of a contingency at the end of the year. Internal services funds haven't changed significantly. And then our trust and agency fund has increased most prominently because of the charter school indirect charges. So that is an overview, pretty rapid, but of the variances between last year and this year, and gives you an idea of what we've been, how we've budgeted. I'm I'm going to stop sharing so I can see who has their hands up. I don't know the order yet, but I'm going to start in my top left-hand corner and say, Benu, what is your question?
So I had two questions that you mentioned. One was that we are expecting a large adjustment from last year for the actual stuff as opposed to what was projected. Is that large adjustment going to be things that we have already spent and we hadn't received the funds for, or is that funds something that's going to be we've already spent but now we'll have extra?
So it goes to our bottom line. It goes to our ending fund balance. Basically, what it is that we had more. We did not have as much property taxes come in as we had anticipated, and that was kind of played out throughout the state. It was they were down slightly, but when everyone has that, there's more money available through the state school fund to be divvied out to everyone. So it's just extra funds from the state that go to our ending fund balance.
So that's where I was wondering that would that help us spend less from the deficit spending area that we were talking about?
It's included already.
Included in
it's
there.
already included there. And what I was saying was when we last met for our last informational meeting, we didn't have that amount.
Okay.
So we were assuming about, I believe it was a $29 million beginning fund balance. And now we're looking at about a 34.2 million beginning fund balance.
Okay. So the second question I had was in the 300 fund section, you were talking about utilities that there is a 4% increase this year. And I'm not sure I understand, given that the buildings are closed to a large extent, why do we have 4% extra utilities?
So it's two-pronged. First, the rate is up. And second, even though we didn't have students in the buildings, we had to run our ventilation system 24 hours a day. We have to make sure that we are still clearing out anything so that we don't have anything sitting. The other thing that we have to do is we have to go in and we had to have our custodians go in and make sure the toilets get flushed and the water runs through so that we don't have any possible pooling of lead or other things. So we're still spending the money on that, and garbage to keep our garbage contract. They still come every week. We still pay them, even if we don't have barrels and barrels.
That kind of sucks. The rest of it makes sense, but garbage people just making around for nothing.
I would agree. That is how it works.
Yeah, the lead stuff I was wondering about because I was reading about a lot of pathogens collecting in pipes if they're not flushed often. Or
so we've been doing that, and we have to every year we're on a 3-year rotating cycle through the state. So like a third of our not facilities but drinking fountains, et cetera, have to go through and be tested every year so that by the end of 3 years, we've been through everything.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions I had.
Okay, Director Bauer.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up under expenditures by function. You mentioned that there was money moved from IDEA into general fund. Is it because, was it a shortfall because we aren't getting the money from the federal?
So we didn't get quite as much money as we expected from the feds and IDEA. And we had moved, more people had been moved over there than we really had the budget for. When payroll was being set up, they just put people over there. And so we had to move them back in. It's something that has, we're working on within our payroll system to make sure that this does not happen. It's been happening fairly regularly for the last few years. And we've worked out a system, I think now, where we've actually pulled the records this year to make sure that none of them will show up in IDEA next year.
But is part of it that it's not fully funded? We've
Oh,
always
yes.
been short, way short.
No, we've been short. Special education
Forever.
is
Yeah.
just, yes, forever.
Right. Thank you.
Certainly. And Havala?
You know what, on the last page that you shared, you referenced VOP administration. What is that? What's VOP?
Oh, our virtual online program.
Oh, thank you. That's what I needed. All right, thank you.
I used an acronym.
No, I don't know this yet. Thank you.
Certainly. Are there any other questions? Oh, I see Corey.
Sorry. I had two unrelated questions. I was just curious. I think the deadline has passed for signing up for VOP, and I was just curious if I'm assuming the max amount or number of people signed up for that. Is that true, or what is that max number?
I'm going to defer to Dr. James on that one.
Yeah, so far we have a little over 600 students that have signed up. We're truing up numbers right now and data, and then plan to do another open to see if there's any additional families that are interested in it, and would also work with families through the summer that are interested in VOP.
And so what's the maximum capacity of that?
Right now we set it at just under 1,000, but we've been pretty open in terms of if we have more students and families that are interested, then we would make all efforts to raise that limit.
Okay. And then my other question, it was referenced a couple times that there have been extra maintenance costs, and I'm assuming at least some of that is related to COVID, or do you foresee that being more long-term? Obviously, it's probably going to be around for a while, some of the measures we're having to take, but just curious if those are costs that will need to be projected down the road too, or if it's more of just kind of the current situation.
I think the current situation has exacerbated things. There are certain things that will probably continue to have the better filtration systems put in, so that should there, God forbid, be another pandemic that's airborne, that we would have the ability to handle it quickly. I think some of those may be ongoing, but as long as we don't have to pull, I mean, even in the dead of winter, we're pulling in cold air from outside. I don't know that we'll have to do that on a continual basis after this next year, hopefully, but it's kind of up to what the regulations will be at that time. Thank you.
Galen, I'll also chime in. I think one of the things that Galen and I noticed as we went back and looked at expenditures from the past couple of years is that our facilities department was overspending their budget slightly by a couple $100,000 fairly consistently, and we were covering it by in other funds. And I think we've finally said that the budget for our annual facilities maintenance was not covering the work that needed to be done. And so that was also a factor in increasing their annual budget.
Okay, Angel?
Are we expecting to receive any funding from the American Rescue Plan Act?
So that's part of the ESSER III dollars were in the American Rescue Plan Act. So that's
17 million.
The 17.1 million. Yes.
Okay.
And Havala, you still have your hand up. Do you have another question? Well, if there are no other questions, I will hand it back. Oh, wait, Monica.
Sorry, I don't have the hand raise button. This is going back to one of your first pages, but with the property tax, what happens when people either defer or don't pay their property tax? Is that covered by the state?
So when we estimate our property taxes, we estimate a property tax collection rate. that is discounted every year. I do not expect that it in 2021 that we will receive every penny that we have levied. We look at past collection rates and then do an average over the last about 5 years. And I apply that and say, that's how much I think we're going to get. And we also look at what we get in the current year for prior year taxes, because as people sell their house, they have to pay their back taxes. As you know, as other things happen, maybe they get a windfall and they pay their back taxes, or something happens. So we have lines for both current year taxes and prior year taxes. But when I'm estimating, I'm looking at about a 96% to 96.4% collection rate each year on current year taxes.
And have we seen any drop with the pandemic?
We haven't seen much. The collection rate has stayed fairly solid, and most of that is because I'm assuming, but part of that is because a lot of people have to pay into their mortgage company to cover their taxes. And so mortgage companies pay that unless you've put enough down and don't have to do that. But the majority of taxpayers usually have it held in an escrow account. So those collection rates are pretty good. The other thing that we know is that if you do pay your taxes on time, or all of them at that first payment point, you get a discount. So we may never see some of those pieces actually collected.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Angel, I'm handing it back to you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public?
We did not receive any comments before or during the meeting.
Good. Is there questions or comment from the committee?
I have just one last question, and this may not be the right place for this, I'm not sure, but when we were talking about, at one point in the presentation, there was talk about having an additional $100,000 for the SRO for the city of Milwaukee, because we're going to be taking that over from Milwaukee High School. And my question is our district committed to the SRO model? And is that working best? Like, as we're thinking about equity and we're thinking about how to reach out to our students, is that the best model? And is there conversation on that? Does that make sense? Is this I know some communities have been talking about what are we doing, what are we thinking of, to kind of think outside the box of our typical policing. And so my question is, as just out of curiosity, have we had those conversations? Do we feel pretty strong in our commitment to that kind of a model for our schools, or has there been any conversation on that topic?
It's a great question, and one that I was expecting tonight. So we, about 3 or 4 months ago, started a community outreach process with our students, with our parents, and really engage them in that question. What do you know about our SRO program? What do you like about it? What concerns do you have with the program? We hired an outside consultant to come in and help lead that process, along with one of our district administrators. And at our May 27th board meeting, we'll be presenting the findings of that community engagement process. I think, well, we'll present those findings. What is included in this budget that's being presented tonight is the funding for school resource officers at each of our high schools. And I think it will provide the presentation on the 27th at our board meeting. I think will provide an opportunity to have now another public opportunity to have a conversation about the roles that school resource officers play and don't play in our school system. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have and we need to continue to have regarding our school resource officers. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
And lastly, but leastly, maybe, my last question is, as we talk about equity, and I know we kind of touched on it in one of the informational meetings, but how are we engaging our students in the equity question? Because I know we all have our ideas of what that means, but I do have a lot of faith in our young people. And I think that they have a lot to offer. And I would like to know, how are we involving them in this conversation in terms of not necessarily the budget committee? And that's why I'm saying maybe it's the wrong place to be asking this, but I would like to know what we're doing to include them. And I do actually think it would be great to have them involved in the budget committee, even to have students be able to process through some of this with us too. But yeah, kind of an open-ended question, but.
I'm not sure it's a budget committee question. That obviously having students on the budget committee would be a budget, maybe a board level conversation. And maybe it is a question, Havala, that we take offline outside of the meeting. But what I can share with you is a lot of our focus with regards to our equity work initially started with our staff. And building our staff's capacity around the development of their equity lens and their knowledge with regards to equity, knowing then that then puts our staff in a better position to have conversations with students. So those conversations, I think one of the things that you have seen this year is, sometimes using those Wednesday community meetings to tackle issues regarding race and culture and experiences that different demographic groups have in our system. One of the things that we've done, I think a really good job of in our school district in the last 7 to 10 years is looking at our curriculum. And every time we adopt a new curriculum, are we adopting that through a lens of equity, and does that curriculum reflect the demographics of our students in our school community? And so it comes down to the literature that the kids are reading in classrooms, and are the characters in that literature reflected of the demographics of our students, or the authors of that literature reflected in the demographics of our students. And so really through our curriculum, through our professional development, and then looking at opportunities for students to interact with other students through affinity groups. And I think we've seen a nice expansion of affinity group opportunities, a little bit less at the elementary school, but certainly at the middle school and high school, really opportunities for students to get together in like affinity groups and begin to talk and tackle issues of race. And then from that, many of those affinity groups have come, school-wide programs and school-wide initiatives that have come out of those affinity groups. So, a brief overview.
I just want to pop in and really underscore what Havala was saying around that student voice piece, because it's so important. And, we know that a lot of our students had really challenging a year with COVID. And now that we're transitioning back, I think to continue to create that, not only that sense of community, but of student experience and hopefully eventually their leadership. And, seeing them tackle on, larger issues around budget or whatever it is that they want to work on that they're passionate on. I think we need to continue, just speaking as one board member, I would really like to continue just really centering their voices and their experiences. And so ditto to everything that Superintendent Utterback said, but I think we can always do more. And I think there's plenty of opportunity moving forward as we bring folks back in to really center their voice and leadership. I really want to stress that importance of that leadership that we want to cultivate in our students as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
Well, if I could just pop in for a second. I really appreciate the curiosity and the questions that are being asked around a lot of the subjects that are inside of the budget. I also want to remind the public and this committee that you're a piece of a puzzle. And this puzzle is going to be put together to make sure that our kids are the superstars of this story. So it's really highly recommended that you attend board meetings, because a lot of the things that you're asking about happen during board meetings. And because you are making a recommendation to us, if you don't know those pieces of the puzzle, it's really difficult to be in this piece of the puzzle and not have a full picture. So I highly recommend that you watch board meetings, attend board meetings, because you're a big piece of a big puzzle, and your recommendation is connected to all the things that we talk about. I think your questions are great, but I'll be honest with you, many of them have happened in board meetings. And so I highly encourage you to attend.
Is there any other questions or comments? Galen, can we have an electronic copy of the call funding presentation that you showed today? That would be very helpful.
Yes, I'll have Lisa send it out to the committee.
Thank you. So I think this is the end of this meeting, right? So let's recess, and we are going to meet again on the 25th. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you all. Be safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.